Samuel Hayes had always been a quiet man, the kind who preferred the company of his animals to the noise and judgment of other people. At 32 years old, he ran a small farm on the outskirts of the New Mexico territory, far enough from town that he could go weeks without seeing another soul. He had inherited the land from his father, and while it was not much, a modest house, a barn, some chickens, a few cattle, and fields that yielded just enough to get by, it was his, and that meant everything to a man who had never quite fit in anywhere else. Samuel had been shy since childhood, stammering when nervous, blushing when spoken to directly, always more comfortable with a book or a plow than with people. The townsfolk thought him odd, and after a few failed attempts at courting local women who found his quietness off-putting, Samuel had resigned himself to a life of solitude. He told himself he was content, that he did not need anyone, but on long evenings when the sunset painted his empty house in shades of gold, he could not quite convince himself that was true. It was late October of 1881 when everything changed. Samuel was closing up the barn for the night when he heard a sound that did not belong, a soft whimper, barely audible over the rustling of hay. His first thought was that one of his animals was hurt, but as he moved deeper into the barn, lantern held high, he discovered something that made his heart stop. Huddled in the corner, partially hidden behind a stack of hay bales, was a young Apache woman. She could not have been more than 25, with long black hair matted with blood and dirt, and eyes wide with pain and fear. Her left shoulder was bleeding through a makeshift bandage, and her breathing was shallow and rapid. When she saw Samuel, she tried to shrink further into the corner, her good hand reaching for a knife at her belt. Samuel froze, raising his free hand slowly. "I will not hurt you," he said softly, though he was not sure she understood English. "Please, you are injured, let me help." The woman watched him with the wariness of a trapped animal, her dark eyes searching his face for any sign of threat. Samuel had heard the stories about Apache raids, about the conflicts between settlers and the tribes, about the soldiers who hunted them. He knew that harboring her could bring serious trouble to his door. But as he looked at this frightened, wounded woman, all he could think about was that she needed help, and he was the only one who could give it. Slowly, moving as non-threateningly as possible, Samuel set down his lantern and backed up a few steps. "I am going to the house to get medical supplies," he said, speaking in the same calm tone he used with skittish horses. "I will be right back. Please do not run, you will hurt yourself worse." He hurried to the house and gathered everything he could think of: clean cloth, whiskey for disinfecting, needle and thread, water, and some bread and dried meat. When he returned to the barn, he half expected her to be gone, but she was still there, slumped against the wall, her eyes struggling to stay open. Over the next hour, Samuel worked with gentle, careful hands to clean and dress her wound. She had been shot, the bullet passing clean through her shoulder, lucky in its way, though she had lost a lot of blood. She flinched at first when he touched her, but as she realized he truly meant no harm, she gradually relaxed, though she never stopped watching him with those intelligent, cautious eyes. "My name is Samuel," he said as he worked, knowing conversation might help keep her conscious. "Samuel Hayes. This is my farm. You are safe here." To his surprise, she spoke. Her voice was weak but clear, her English accented but understandable. "Aida," she said simply. Then, after a pause, "Why do you help me?" Samuel considered the question as he tied off the bandage. "Because you need help," he said finally. "Is that not reason enough?" Over the next 3 days, Samuel kept Aida hidden in the barn. He brought her food and water, changed her bandages, and gradually, she began to recover. She also began to talk. She told him she had been separated from her group during an encounter with soldiers, that she had been running for 2 days before collapsing in his barn. She told him about her people, about the land that had been taken, about the constant moving and hiding and fighting just to survive. Samuel listened, and for once, his shyness did not matter because she did most of the talking. He found himself captivated not just by her words but by the fire in her eyes when she spoke of her home, the sadness when she mentioned family members lost, the strength that seemed to radiate from her despite her injury. On the 4th day, Aida announced she was well enough to leave. "My people will be looking for me," she said. "I must try to find them." Samuel felt a strange panic at the thought of her leaving. "You are not fully healed yet. The wound could reopen. And you do not have supplies." "I cannot stay," Aida said firmly. but her eyes were soft as she looked at him. "You have been kind to me, Samuel Hayes. Kinder than any white man I have known. But if I am found here, soldiers will come. They will take your land, maybe worse. I will not bring that upon you." Samuel wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. Instead, he packed supplies for her, food, a canteen of water, a warm blanket, and one of his own jackets since hers was torn and blood-stained. As she prepared to leave that evening, she paused at the barn door. "I will not forget what you have done," she said. "Among my people, a life debt is sacred. One day, I will repay this." "You do not owe me anything," Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just hope you find your people. I hope you stay safe." Something flickered across Aida's face, surprise perhaps, or emotion. She reached out and touched his hand briefly. "You are a good man, Samuel Hayes. There are not many like you in this world." Then she was gone, slipping into the twilight like a shadow, and Samuel was alone again. He told himself to forget about her, to go back to his quiet life. But he found he could not. At night, he lay awake thinking about her stories, her courage, the brief warmth of her hand on his. He worked his fields mechanically, his mind elsewhere. The loneliness that he had grown accustomed to now felt unbearable. 6 months passed. Spring turned to summer, and summer began its slow fade toward autumn. Samuel had almost convinced himself that the encounter had been a dream, something his lonely mind had conjured up to break the monotony of his existence. But on a warm September evening, as he was finishing his dinner, he heard the sound of many horses approaching. Samuel's blood ran cold. A group of riders coming to his isolated farm could mean nothing good. He grabbed his rifle and stepped out onto his porch, his heart hammering. What he saw made him nearly drop the weapon in shock. There were perhaps 30 Apache riders, warriors and women both, arranged in a formal semicircle before his house. And at the front, sitting tall and healthy on a painted horse, was Aida. She looked different, stronger, dressed in beautiful traditional clothing decorated with intricate beadwork. Beside her was an older Apache man whose bearing spoke of authority and respect. Aida dismounted and walked toward Samuel's porch. Behind her, the entire group followed at a respectful distance. Samuel stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. "Hello, Samuel Hayes," Aida said, a small smile playing at her lips. "I told you I would repay my debt." "You do not owe me anything," Samuel stammered, his face burning red with the attention of so many eyes upon him. "I told you that. I only did what anyone would do." "What anyone would do?" Aida interrupted gently. "No. What you did, few would do. You risked everything to help someone you did not know, someone your own people would call enemy. You asked for nothing. You expected nothing. You showed me kindness when I had known only cruelty from your kind." The older man stepped forward. "I am Cochise, leader of these people," he said in heavily accented but clear English. "Aida is my niece, daughter of my brother. She has told us what you did for her. This is not a small thing." "I just helped someone who was hurt," Samuel said, his voice shaking. "That is all." "That is everything," Cochise said firmly. "We have watched you these months. We have seen that you live alone, that you work hard, that you harm no one. Aida has spoken much about you. She says you are gentle, that you treat even your animals with kindness, that you listen to her stories as if they mattered." Samuel glanced at Aida, confused. "You have been watching me?" She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I needed to be certain," she said. "I needed to know if the man who saved me was truly as good as he seemed, or if it was only a moment of weakness that he would regret. I have watched from the hills. I have seen you, Samuel Hayes. And I have thought much about you." "I do not understand," Samuel said, though his heart was beginning to beat faster for a different reason now. Aida took a deep breath. "Among my people, when a woman finds a man of honor and courage, a man who has saved her life, she may choose him. If he is willing, if he would have her." She looked directly into Samuel's eyes. "I have come to ask if you would have me as your wife." Samuel felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "Wife," he whispered. "I know this is sudden," Aida continued quickly. "I know our peoples are different, that we have been enemies. But I have lived among hatred and war all my life, and I am tired of it. When I was in your barn, hurt and frightened, you showed me that kindness can exist between our peoples. You showed me that a man can be gentle and still be strong. I have thought of little else these 6 months. But I am nobody, Samuel protested. I am just a farmer. I am not brave or strong. I can barely talk to people. I am shy and awkward. You are kind, Aida said simply. You are honest. You are gentle. These things matter more than words spoken smoothly. I have known many warriors, Samuel Hayes. But you are the only truly brave man I have met. Cochise stepped forward again. If you accept, you would have the friendship of our people. We would help you with your farm. We would protect you. You would be family. But you must understand, it would not be easy. Many of your people would not accept this union. Some of mine will struggle with it as well. You would face judgment and perhaps danger. Samuel looked at Aida, really looked at her. He saw the hope in her eyes, the vulnerability she was showing by standing before him like this, offering herself to a man who had every reason to refuse her. He thought about the 6 months of loneliness, of lying awake thinking about her, wondering if he would ever see her again. He thought about the gentle way she had touched his hand before she left, the stories she had shared, the strength and courage she had shown. I am not good with words, Samuel said finally, his voice quiet but steady. I never have been. But I have not stopped thinking about you since you left. When you were here, for those few days, this farm felt less empty. I felt less empty. He paused, gathering his courage. If you will have me, despite all my faults and failings, then yes. Yes, I would be honored to have you as my wife. A collective murmur went through the assembled Apache, and Samuel saw smiles on several faces. Aida's own face broke into a radiant smile, and she closed the distance between them, taking both his hands in hers. Then it is settled, Cochise declared. We will prepare for a ceremony that honors both our traditions. The shy farmer and the Apache woman. Perhaps together you will show both our peoples that there is another way besides hatred and war. The wedding took place a week later, a blend of Apache traditions and simple vows. Some of the townspeople heard about it and were scandalized. A few even threatened trouble, but they found themselves facing not just Samuel but a group of Apache warriors who had made it clear that this union was under their protection. Eventually, most people decided it was easier to simply avoid the Hayes farm than to make an issue of it. Samuel and Aida built a life together that defied all expectations. She taught him her language, and he taught her to read English. He learned about her culture, her beliefs, her people's history, and she learned about his dreams, his quiet hopes, his gentle way of seeing the world. The farm prospered with the help of Aida's people, who would visit regularly, and gradually, a small community formed, a place where Apache and whites who were willing to look past hatred could trade and talk in peace. Years later, when people asked Aida why she had chosen Samuel Hayes, she would smile and say, because he saw a person who needed help, not an enemy. Because he was brave enough to be kind when kindness was dangerous. Because he loved me not despite who I was, but because of it. And because sometimes, the quietest hearts are the strongest ones. Samuel never did become comfortable with large groups or public speaking. But in the privacy of his home, with Aida beside him and eventually their children around them, he found his voice. He found his place. And he found that sometimes, the greatest courage is not in fighting or in grand gestures, but simply in opening your heart when the world tells you to close it, and in choosing kindness when hatred would be easier. The shy farmer who hid an Apache woman in his barn became a legend in his own right, not for battles won or riches gained, but for proving that love and compassion could build bridges across the deepest divides. And that perhaps was the most powerful kind of courage of all.